sky above Ashara 7 was a fractured mirror. Where once a planetary shield had shimmered like a perfect glass dome, it now hung in the air in great broken plates. Each shard suspended at impossible angles, they caught the pale light of a distant sun and reflected it in ghostly patterns across the surface below. Through the gaps, stars peered down like patient witnesses to an ancient tragedy. Ashara 7 had been silent for a very long time. No city lights glimmered here, no shuttles streaked across the sky. The winds carried only the soft hiss of shifting sands and the brittle sigh of metal that had endured centuries of wear. The world had once been a thriving hub of forward bastion for a young and ambitious humanity, but now it was a monument to loss. Whatever had happened here, it had been swift, fierce, and final. In the heart of this stillness lay the Valkyria. Once a proud warship of the interstellar fleets, she now rested beneath dunes the color of scorched bronze. Time and sand had half swallowed her, leaving only the curve of her bow and the faint outline of her dorsal fin visible to the sky. Faint cracks ran along her hull where armor plating had warped from heat, but her lines remained graceful, sharp, purposeful, and stubbornly whole. To anyone else, she might have looked like nothing more than a relic of a war no one remembered. But the Valkyria was more than a hunk of metal and history. Deep within her hull, past sealed corridors and long-dead terminals, there was still a pulse, weak, irregular, but steady, a flicker of systems that had never truly powered down. The sands around her were undisturbed, no footprints, no signs of scavenging. In truth, few dared set foot on Ashara 7. The fractured shield above the planet was dangerous. Its energy field still sparked at random, creating bursts of static lightning and electromagnetic storms. Ships that ventured too close sometimes vanished, their navigation scrambled by the unstable remnants of the shield systems. For centuries, the world had been marked as a hazard, left to drift in obscurity. Yet the Valkyrie story had not ended. The locals in the outer sectors, those who traded in whispers and shadow, told stories about her. They said she had been the last to fight before humanity's final retreat, that she had vanished in a blaze of light as the enemy fleets closed in. Some claimed she had taken her crew with her into death, refusing to be captured. Others said she had fallen silent mid-battle, her fate swallowed by the fog of war. In time, even those stories faded, leaving only myths and half-forgotten names. If anyone could have stood on the dunes now and gazed upon her form, they might have felt the weight of what she represented, not just a ship, but the last breath of a people who had once stretched across the stars. The Valkyria had been designed for more than battle. She was a symbol, a promise that no matter how dark the night, humanity would always rise to meet it. The wind shifted. A stream of sand trickled down her bow and scattered into the air. Somewhere deep inside the vessel, a faint light blinked. Perhaps it was nothing more than a remnant program cycling through old routines. Perhaps it was something more, a spark, waiting for the right moment to catch flame again. In the distance, far beyond the dunes and silent plains, the fractured sky shifted. A streak of silver burned across the horizon. A ship, small and fast, slipping through the gaps in the broken shield. It descended cautiously, banking to avoid the jagged arcs of static that flashed like distant storms. The ship's hull bore the marks of hard travel, its paint scraped and faded. It had not come here by accident. Ashara 7 was about to have its first visitor in centuries, and the Valkyria, resting in her grave of sand, was about to wake. The streak of silver descended through the broken sky like a cautious arrow. Its small, wedge-shaped hull skimmed the edges of the fractured shield, weaving between floating shards of energy field with the precision of someone who had done this sort of thing before. From the cockpit of the Wayfarer, Kael'ren kept his hands steady on the controls, eyes scanning the shifting arcs of static lightning that bloomed without warning. His ship's sensors hissed with interference. The planet below was a storm of scrambled readings and flickering ghost signals. Kael muttered to himself as he adjusted the tuning filters. Come on, give me something real. The display cleared for a heartbeat, long enough for him to confirm his destination, a deep canyon near the northern hemisphere, where his employer's charts claimed possible salvage opportunities existed. That was the polite way of saying there might be valuable junk nobody else had dared to touch. Kael wasn't in the habit of chasing ghost jobs, but the pay had been good, better than good, especially for something this quiet. Salvaging was a dangerous business in the outer sectors, and most worlds worth stripping had long since been picked clean. Ashara 7, however, had remained untouched, mostly because nobody wanted to risk navigating its unstable shield. Kael, wasn't reckless, but he was careful in a way that often passed for luck. The Wayfarer slipped through the final layers of interference and descended toward the canyon floor. Pale sunlight filtered through the shattered sky, painting long shadows across the cracked earth. The remains of structures jutted up from the ground, like broken teeth parts of what might once have been a settlement or an outpost. Metal beams, twisted into unnatural arcs, scorched and brittle. Kel's boots crunched on dry grit as he stepped down the landing ramp. His helmet visor adjusted to the ambient glare, tinting the world in shades of gold and silver. The air here was thin, but breathable, carrying the faint metallic tang of oxidized steel. He swept the area with a portable scanner, expecting the usual dead readings of an abandoned world. Instead, the display flickered again. "Now that's strange," he murmured. The readings were faint, so faint they could have been dismissed as static. But there was a rhythm to them, not the jagged randomness of interference, but a steady pulse, energy signatures buried deep beneath the canyon floor, and something else. His scanner hesitated, then resolved the pattern into a life sign. A single, distinct life sign. Kale froze. That couldn't be right. Ashara 7 was supposed to be empty. No settlers, no scavengers, not even rogue drones, and yet the reading persisted. Adjusting his scanner's range, Kale traced the signal to a cluster of dunes at the far edge of the canyon. They rose higher than the surrounding landscape, oddly symmetrical. Beneath them, his scanner detected a large metallic mass massive enough to be a ship. His brow furrowed. No way. He climbed the rise slowly, sand slipping beneath his boots. At the crest, he stopped. Below him, just visible through the shifting sand, was the unmistakable curve of a starship's hull. Time and storms had buried most of it, but the sheer scale was obvious. This wasn't a freighter or a shuttle, it was a warship, and if his scanner was right, it was still alive. Kale descended into the shallow depression, running his hand over the exposed metal. The surface was warm from the sun, rough with age. His scanner pinged again, louder this time, as though whatever it was had sensed his presence. The life sign reading sharpened dot. He found the first access hatch half buried in sand. The manual release handle was rusted in place, but Kale was patient. He cleared the sand with his gloves, then attached a small magnetic cutter from his belt. The hatch groaned, reluctant to yield after centuries of silence, but finally shifted open with a hiss of stale air. Inside, the air was cooler. Shadows, stretching down narrow corridors lined with inactive panels. Dust floated in slow spirals, disturbed by his movement. "The Wayfarer's on board, I whispered in his ear through his calm. "Warning. Structural integrity uncertain. Recommend caution." "Noted," Kale replied softly, though he kept moving, deeper inside. The scanner's pulse quickened. He passed through bulkheads and sleeping quarters, untouched for generations. A faint hum began to echo through the hull, barely audible, but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. It led him to a sealed chamber, the door marked in faded human script, "Cryo Bay." Kel's breath caught. Cryo chambers meant crew. Crew meant survivors, or, more likely after so long, remains. But his scanner didn't lie. There was still life here, and as he stepped closer, unaware of what waited behind the door, the Valkyria seemed to stir. The cryo bay door loomed before Kale like the sealed lid of a tomb. Dust clung to its frame, softening the hard edges of the ancient steel. The faded lettering was just visible under the grime. "Crew stasis facility. Authorized personnel." Only, Kale brushed his glove over the words, feeling a faint indentation where fingers had once traced them, maybe long ago in farewell. The door's manual override was stubborn, frozen with age. Kale retrieved a compact plasma torch from his belt and cut carefully along the locking clamps. The torch's hiss and the quiet pop of molten metal breaking free were the only sounds in the silence. With the last clamp released, the heavy panel slid aside with a reluctant sigh. A cool mist escaped, curling around his boots. The air inside was colder, sharp with the faint bite of cryogenic coolant. Dim blue lights flickered on along the walls, as if the room itself had been startled awake. Rows of cryopods stretched into the shadows, each one framed in soft light, their transparent lids clouded with frost. Kale moved slowly down the aisle, scanning each one. Most of the pods were dark systems, dead, their occupants long gone. Yet here and there, a green light pulsed faintly, steady and alive. The life sign he had tracked led him to the center pod in the row. The glass was misted over, but he could make out the outline of a woman's face, still, serene, untouched by time. The nameplate below the glass read, Captain Alara Vance, Commanding Officer, ISS Valkyria. Cale felt a prickle at the back of his neck. The Valkyria. He'd heard the name whispered in old spacer bars, usually by pilots who liked to tell impossible stories, a legend from a war that had ended before his grandparents were born. He'd never thought the ship or its captain were anything more than myth. He checked the pod's status display. Power was minimal, but stable. The life support systems were still functioning, though barely. She was alive. Against every possible odd, she was alive. Cale hesitated, weighing the risk. Reviving someone who'd been under for centuries wasn't just a matter of pressing a button. If the process went wrong, she could die before she ever opened her eyes. And then there was the question of what next. If she woke, if she even could, what would she find in this strange, empty galaxy? The hesitation lasted only a moment. Something in the quiet pulse of the pod felt expectant, as if she had been waiting for him to arrive. He keyed in the activation sequence, bypassing the ship's outdated command protocols. The chamber filled with a rising hum as the pod's internal systems came to life. Frost began to retreat from the glass. The faint hiss of venting gas filled the room, followed by the soft clatter of unlocking clamps. Inside, Alara's eyelids trembled, then slowly opened. Her gaze was unfocused at first, pupils adjusting to the dim blue light. She took a breath shallow, then deeper, and the sound seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. Cale stepped back, giving her space. "Easy," he said quietly, voice carrying more reassurance than he'd expected. "You're safe. You've been in stasis for a long time." Her eyes found his, and for a heartbeat, there was no recognition, only the cool, assessing stare of someone who had been trained to measure strangers in an instant. "Who are you?" Her voice was raw from disuse, yet steady. "Kaelrin, I found your ship. You're aboard the Valkyria?" He let the statement hang, unsure if confirming the obvious would bring clarity or confusion. She blinked slowly, as though pulling memories from the depths of a frozen sea. "The Valkyria. Yes. The war. What's our status?" Cale hesitated. "That's complicated. The war you remember, it's been over for a very long time." Something in her expression shifted, her jaw set with quiet determination. "How long?" He exhaled. "Centuries." The weight of the word settled between them. She glanced past him at the other pods, reading the absence of light as clearly as any report. Her shoulders straightened. "Then I suppose I'm the last," she murmured. Cale wasn't sure whether she meant the last of her crew or the last of humanity's captains. But in that moment, he understood something about her. She might have been asleep for hundreds of years, but she had not been broken by it. Whatever fire had driven her before the war still burned, waiting for its moment to rise again. The faint hum of the cryosystems faded into the background as Cale guided Alara out of the chamber. Her steps were unsteady at first, but her posture remained upright, her gaze sharp. She moved like someone who had learned to mask weakness, even if her body hadn't yet caught up with her will. They walked through narrow corridors that had been silent for centuries. Dust coated the deck plates in a fine, pale layer, softening the Valkyrie's once precise lines. Every few meters, Cale's headlamp illuminated faded wall markings, emergency instructions, deck numbers, crew insignia like pieces of a world. Preserved in amber, Alara reached out to brush her fingers over the nearest wall. "She's holding together better than I expected," she murmured, almost to herself. Cale raised an eyebrow. "You expected this?" "I always knew," she said, "that if the Valkyria fell, she wouldn't fall apart." Her eyes flicked to him. "What year is it?" Cale hesitated. He'd been avoiding that question, but her expression demanded the truth. "By the Union Standard Calendar, it's the year 3792. She slowed, her breath catching almost imperceptibly. 317 years, she whispered. For a long moment, they walked in silence. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, deliberate. "When I went under, it was 3475. The war was still raging. We were the last line between the colonies and extinction." They turned into a side corridor where the air seemed cooler, the shadows deeper. Cale kept glancing at her, curiosity pressing at him until it broke free. "You fought in it?" He stopped himself. "The old war? Against who?" Alara's gaze went distant, as if she were looking not at the corridor, but through it, into some place far removed from the present. "They were called the Varen. To us, they were a storm-given form, beautiful in their own way, but cold, deliberate. They didn't conquer, they consumed. Entire worlds burned away like mist in sunlight. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge beneath it, as if the memory still had teeth. The Valkyria was part of a strike group sent to hold the frontier. We bought time for the evacuations. Every hour we could hold the line meant more lives saved. But we knew it couldn't last. Kale tried to imagine in a sky full of burning ships, the air thick with the smell of scorched metal and ozone. His salvage runs had taken him through plenty of wreckage fields, but they were quiet, dead things. He couldn't picture the moment when they were alive with fire and motion. What happened? He asked quietly, her jaw tightened. The fleet broke. Command ordered us to withdraw, but the Valkyrie's drive was crippled. We fought our way to Ashara 7. I'd ordered the crew into stasis hoping someone would find us, or that the war would end before we were discovered. She let out. A breath that carried both relief and resignation. Looked like the latter happened first. They reached a view in port, its glass webbed with fine cracks but still holding. Outside, the fractured shield hung in its eternal suspension, catching the pale sunlight. Alara rested her hand against the frame when that shield went up. This planet became a fortress. When it shattered, it became a grave. Kale studied her in profile. You said you hoped someone would find you. Now I have. What happens next? Her lips curved in something too thoughtful to be called a smile. That depends. Tell me about humanity. How many colonies are left? What fleets patrol the lanes? How far has our reach grown? Kale didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, telling her more than words could. Finally, he said, humanity's scattered. There are pockets here and there. Traders, stationers, some small settlements, but fleets, united colonies. That's all history now for. The first time since waking, her composure wavered. The weight of his words seemed to settle on her shoulders. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. Then it's worse than I thought. She turned from the window, her expression sharpening, with quiet resolve. If there's anything left worth saving, we'll find it. And if there's nothing left, we'll rebuild. The Valkyria wasn't meant to fade quietly into the dark. Kale wasn't sure whether she was speaking to him, to herself, or to the ship, but in that moment, he felt the air around them change just slightly, like the faintest tremor before a storm. The Valkyrie's carters groaned faintly as Kale and Alara moved deeper toward the command deck. Somewhere far inside the hull, the ancient reactors murmured like a sleeper turning in their bed. Faint, but alive. Dust most drifted in there. Flashlight beams, settling again in the still air once they passed. Alara moved with growing steadiness now, her stride regaining the rhythm of command. Kale noticed how she seemed to orient herself without hesitation, taking turns without asking. She knew this ship like he knew the Wayfarer's controls. Even 3 centuries of silence couldn't erase those instincts. As they rounded a corner. Near the central lift, Kale's wrist scanner gave a short, sharp ping. He frowned, tapping the display. That's odd. What is it? Alara asked, her gaze narrowing. I've been keeping an eye on energy fluctuations. Thought it was just interference from your old systems warming up, but he turned the display so she could see. A pulsing signal traced faintly across the readout. This isn't from the Valkyrie's core. It's coming from somewhere else. Close. Her eyes sharpened. Show me. They followed the scanner's lead, winding down a narrower maintenance passage that ran along the outer hull. The air here was colder. The walls beaded with condensation from some failing insulation. The signal grew stronger until they reached a sealed bulkhead. Kale crouched, running his hand along the frame. This isn't on your schematics, is it? Alara's gaze was fixed on the lock panel. It is, but it wasn't supposed to be accessible without my authorization. That was enough to make him wary. He pulled a small multi-tool from his belt, popped open the panel, and bypassed the lock in under a minute. The bulkhead door shuttered open, releasing a stale metallic scent into the passage. Beyond was a narrow chamber lined with storage racks. Many of them collapsed under their own age. But at the far end stood something that didn't match the Valkyrie's design. It was a black pod, angular, compact, with faint violet markings crawling along its surface like veins. A low, almost inaudible hum came from within. Kale felt his hair prickle at the base of his neck. That doesn't look human. No, Alara said, her voice quiet and tight. It's not. She stepped closer, scanning the markings with her eyes, Varen, a tracking beacon, and more than that. She turned sharply to him. It's awake. Kale instinctively stepped back. You're telling me your ship has been carrying an active Varen device for 300 years? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she crouched beside the pod, brushing her fingers over the markings as if confirming something she already knew. This isn't standard Varen tech. It's a sleeper unit, the kind they use to deploy behind enemy lines. If it's still functional, it's been quietly broadcasting our position, waiting for someone to hear. Kale's jaw tightened, and if someone hears, they'll come, she said simply, and they don't send greetings. The implications hit him like cold water. So, your ship's been a lighthouse for the thing that tried to destroy humanity. All this time, Alara stood, her expression grim, not for much longer. She turned toward the pod as if preparing to destroy it then and there, but hesitated. Kale caught the hesitation immediately. What? This model might have records, she said. Data on Varen movements, fleet strength, maybe even coordinates to other survivors. If we destroy it now, we lose that chance forever. Kale stared at her. Or we keep it, and your ancient enemies come knocking. She met his gaze evenly. I faced them before. I can do it again, but I need to know what's left of them and of us. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the pod's faint, steady hum. Finally, Kale said, "Then we'd better figure out how to read it before it calls its friends." Alara gave a sharp nod. "Command deck. The Valkyrie systems may still have the interfaces to connect with it, but once we wake this thing up, there's no going back." Kale glanced one last time at the black pod. The faint violet vein seemed to pulse, as if aware of their attention. Something told him they weren't the only ones in this galaxy slowly waking from a long sleep. The command deck of the Valkyria was a cathedral of quiet power. Even in its long slumber, it still carried the gravitas of a ship that had once led fleets into battle. Rows of consoles curved toward the captain's chair, their surfaces dulled by age, but still intact. Above, the shattered main display hung like a broken window to the stars. Alara stepped into the center of the deck, breathing in the faint scent of old circuitry and oil. She ran her hand along the back of the captain's chair, her fingers lingering. On the carved initials at the top, Kale noticed them, EV, etched deep. Like an anchor to her identity, stations 1 through 3, bring them online, she said automatically, her voice carrying the crisp authority of command. Kale moved without argument, brushing dust off touchscreens and coaxing the Valkyrie systems awake. One by one, consoles flickered to life, their amber displays casting warm light across the room. The black pod sat in the center of the main navigation table, silent but thrumming with that low, alien hum. Its violet veins pulsed slowly in a rhythm that felt unsettlingly like breathing. Kale glanced at Alara. "I'll ask again. You're sure this is a good idea?" "No," she said simply, "but it's a necessary one." She connected a hardened data cable from the console to the pod. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the navigation table lit up in cascading streams of alien script, sharp and fluid, like silver rivers on black stone. The characters shifted in looping patterns before settling into a fixed alignment. Alara's eyes narrowed. "It's a handshake protocol. It recognizes the Valkyria." Kale frowned. "Wait, you're telling me it knows your ship?" "Yes," she said, her fingers flying across the console. "This isn't just a tracker. It's a liaison unit, designed to communicate directly with captured vessels or sleeper assets." Before Kale could reply, the pod emitted a soft tone, not loud, but resonant enough to vibrate in his bones. The alien script morphed again, this time into a sequence of pulsing symbols that scrolled rapidly. Alara's jaw tightened. "It's sending. Sending what?" Kale asked sharply. She didn't look up. "A status update. 3 centuries late, but the Varen don't think in our timescales. To them, this signal is fresh. It means we're here." Kale swore under his breath. "So we basically just waved a giant beacon at your worst nightmare." The pod gave another tone, deeper this time. The navigation display shifted, showing a faint star map. Unfamiliar to Kale, but Alara leaned in immediately, her eyes scanned the coordinates. Her expression a mix of awe and dread. "These are listening posts. Varen outposts scattered along what used to be the frontier. They're still there." Her voice was low, almost reverent. "And here," she tapped the far edge of the map, "this symbol means life-sustaining. Not just for them, for us." Kale's brow furrowed. "You think it's pointing to human colonies? Or what's left of them?" she said. "If these coordinates are still active, they could lead us to survivors. maybe even organized resistance. Before he could respond, a sharp chirp came from the console. The pod's violet veins brightened, their glow now unmistakably urgent. Alien text flashed rapidly. Alara translated without looking away. It received a reply. Kale's stomach tightened. Already, they were listening, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of certainty. They never stopped listening. The main display flared to life, static and ghost images forming into a crude visual feed, a cluster of shapes resolved against the darkness, long, spine silhouettes that moved like predators through deep water. Kale didn't recognize them, but he didn't have to. The way Alara's expression hardened told him enough. Varen, she said, they're on their way. Kale stared at the display, at the distance readout shrinking far too quickly. How much time do we have? Not enough, she replied. We need the Valkyria fully operational before they arrive, or we'll be nothing more than the last coordinates in their logbook. The pod hummed again. Almost smugly, Kale found himself glaring at it as if it could feel his anger. Somewhere, in the silence between its pulses, he thought he heard the faintest echo, like the distant rhythm of many wings beating in unison. The moment the Varen silhouette faded from the static, blurred display, the command deck seemed to grow colder. Kale could feel the weight of the approaching threat pressing against the walls, as if the Valkyria itself sensed the danger. Alara stood still for a long moment, her hands resting on the captain's chair. Then she moved with sudden precision, crossing to the master system's console. Power routing, main and secondary lines, she said sharply. We're bringing the core fully online. Kale hesitated. The main core hasn't run in over 3 centuries. If something blows, she cut him a look that left no room for doubt. If we don't light it, there won't be a ship left to blow. That was the end of it. Kale followed her to the engineering station, working quickly to bypass corroded relays and coax frozen conduits into opening. Across the deck, dormant systems began to hum. The sound was tentative at first, like the uncertain breaths of someone waking from a long, dreamless sleep. Then the hum deepened, took on a steady rhythm, and spread through the ship's bones. On the forward bulkhead, a line of status indicators flickered from red to amber to green. One by one, systems long thought dead stirred awake. Weapons control, navigation, shielding arrays. Somewhere deep within the ship, the faint grind of gyros adjusting echoed upward. She's responding, Kale said under his breath, almost disbelieving. Alara's eyes stayed fixed on the readouts. She remembers. The words didn't feel like a metaphor. There was something uncanny in the way the Valkyria was coming back to life, not just mechanically, but with a sense of recognition, as if the ship knew her captain had returned. A loathing rolled through the deck, and Kale felt it in his boots. That's the main reactor coming to full cycle, he noted. But your energy grid's bleeding output somewhere. Primary weapons charge, Alara said without looking up. It's been waiting for permission to wake for 300 years. It's not going to whisper. On the display, the Varen signal markers crept closer, their trajectories tightening toward the planet. Kale glanced at the timer. At this speed, they'll be in atmosphere within the hour. Plenty of time, she replied, moving toward the weapons station. We only need 20 minutes. Kale gave her a sidelong glance. To do what? She didn't answer immediately. Her hands moved over the console, bringing up tactical overlays to make the Valkyria remember what she was built for. The ship shuddered as dormant railgun mounts rotated for the first time in centuries. Twin spinal cannons extended from their housings along the hull's dorsal line, locking into firing position with a deep, satisfying clang in the forward bays. Missile racks unfolded like wings. Kale grinned despite himself. All right, she's not subtle. She was never meant to be, Alara said. The Valkyria was the fleet's spear. If she's going down on fire. A sudden chime from the comms array drew their attention. Kale frowned. We're picking something up, but it's not Varen. Alara crossed quickly to his side. The signal was faint, distorted, but undeniably human in structure. A looping beacon code, repeating over and over. Her breath caught. That's a survivor signal. One of ours. Kale scanned the signal origin. His stomach tightened. It's coming from just beyond the planet's outer debris field. The implications were immediate. If they could reach that beacon, they might find another human crew, or what was left of one. But it would mean breaking cover and drawing the Varen directly toward them. Alara's eyes moved between the beacon readout and the approaching enemy icons. We can't ignore it. If they're alive, they'll be the first new human voices I've heard in 3 centuries. Kale studied the tactical map, and if they're bait, her voice was steady, that we deal with it. The Valkyria didn't survive this long to cower in the dark. The deck vibrated again as the core reached full power, the sound resonating like the growl of some ancient beast. Kale realized that, in its own way, the Valkyria was just as ready for this fight as her captain. The old warship's lights blazed brighter, the tactical displays sharpened, and a deep pulse rolled through the hull, the sound of a predator. Remembering what it was, Elara looked to Kale. Strap in. We're going hunting. The Valkyria shuddered as its main thrusters ignited, the hull vibrating with renewed life. The ancient warship surged away from Ashara 7's atmosphere, piercing the void between scattered debris fields where the faint human beacon pulsed steadily. Elara tightened her grip on the command chair, her eyes locked on the tactical displays. The Varan ships were closing fast, sleek, deadly shapes drifting through the black, moving with cold, precise intent. Their silhouettes were a haunting reminder of a war thought long over, but now very much alive. Target acquired, Kale said, fingers dancing over the weapons console. Railguns ready, missile bays standing by. Elara nodded. Let's remind them who they're hunting. With a deep roar, the Valkyria unleashed its first volley. Railgun blasts streaking like silver arrows into the void, lighting up distant shapes with explosions. The Varan responded instantly, launching swarms of dart-like drones that moved faster than the eye could follow, twisting to intercept the incoming fire. The bridge filled with alerts and sirens, but Elara's voice cut through it like steel. Evasive maneuvers, full thrusters, dispersed countermeasures. The Valkyria twisted and rolled, ancient gyros thrumming as she danced among the debris. Kale marveled at the ship's resilience, its systems awakening in perfect harmony with her commander's will. The Varan vessels closed the gap, their own weapons spitting corrosive beams that scorched the Valkyrie shields. Sparks flew along the hull, and the bridge shuddered under the impact. Shields holding at 60%, Kale reported, voice steady despite the tension. Elara's gaze was fierce. We don't have to hold, we have to fight back harder. She keyed a sequence, and missile racks opened with a metallic hiss. Guided warheads launched in deadly arcs, homing on the Varan ships. Explosions blossomed in space, lighting the darkness like fireworks. Suddenly, the human beacon signal flared. Stronger. Elara's eyes darted to the navigation console. They're nearby. We have company. On the main view screen, a battered, but unmistakably human cruiser emerged from the shadows of the debris field. Its hull was scarred and patched, but its engines burned bright. Alive against all odds, unidentified vessel. This is Captain Elara Vance of the Valkyria. Respond. A crackling voice answered. Rough and tired, but unmistakably human. Valkyria. By the stars, we thought you were a ghost. Kale exchanged a glance with Elara. They made it. We have survivors, she said softly, almost in disbelief. The two ships moved closer, the human cruiser weaving through debris with desperate agility. Its captain appeared on the comm screen, a weathered woman with determined eyes, scars marking her face like badges of survival. We've been hiding for decades, the woman said. The Varan pushed us into the shadows, but we kept fighting. Waiting, Elara nodded. So did we. The Valkyria was meant to be the spearhead of humanity's fight, and she's not done yet. The human cruiser's captain smiled faintly. Then let's finish this fight together. Outside, the Varan vessels regrouped, preparing for a final strike. The Valkyrie's weapons systems hummed with renewed vigor, ready to defend the last flickers of human hope. Elara stood, her silhouette framed by the glowing consoles. For every world lost, every life taken, we will stand. We will fight. Because humanity doesn't break, we rise. The Valkyria surged forward, weapons blazing, into the heart of the storm dot and in the dark expanse of space. The last human ship carried the fire of a forgotten world, a beacon of defiance, a promise that as long as one ship flew, humanity's story was far from over.